I just remember going to a lot of memorial events. I look back and I think I feel like a lot of my childhood was taken away from me because I had to just, I was trying to constantly comprehending something.
Welcome to the Unaparent podcast, the place that delivers deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting. My name is Katia Reguero Lindor, and I am your host. Join us as we debunk myths surrounding parenthood and provide an empathetic, judgment-free space for parents and parents to be. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're joined by Cait. She is a child development and trauma expert. So I'll let you, Cait, sort of tell us a little bit about what you do, your profession, and where everything started for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. So I got my undergraduate degree from New York University in child development and trauma. My whole career in studying child development and why I was interested in it is through my own experience as an adolescent, losing my dad, who was a firefighter on September 11th, and I was 10 years old. So I had been very involved with different communities around trauma and grief and resiliency. And one particular community that was very impactful for me was America's Camp. And this camp was for all children who lost a parent on September 11th. And I was a camper for 5 years, and very shortly after became a counselor. And it was from working with other children who had been impacted by 9/11 that I was really drawn to just having a better understanding of trauma and how it affects our development. And also for me personally, I was 10 and my brother was 16 and my sister was 26. And so, I felt like this event had such an impact on my life, and I wanted to be able to give back and be able to support other children who've been going through the unimaginable, and also be able to support families as well. I started off teaching through Teach for America, and I taught for about 8 years. And shortly after, I went into back to grad school for mental health counseling. And my focus right now is I'm a mental health counselor, is working with children and families. And trying to have a better understanding of what support systems we can provide our children, especially in this day and age when there's a lot of different factors that kind of contributing what helps create a safe and effective learning environment for our children.
Wow, what a story. You've definitely been through your fair share of trauma. And so if you don't mind, I guess taking us back to what was helpful for you to overcome your traumas personally, what was lacking, maybe what you were trying to provide for children that perhaps you did not have, like how you provide that support for your kids and families that you work with.
Yeah, so I think for me that really stands out when I work with children and when I think back to my adolescent self is what it really just means to just show up at a child's level. I mean, physically, and I mean, emotionally. I remember when I was getting my training and teaching, that was something that was huge that we had got training in, is like, you just recognizing your position in a classroom, right? And how the impact of just like getting on a child's level so they can see your facial expressions, kind of meeting them there. And I think about the same thing with a child who's going through, through grief, through trauma. trauma in itself makes someone feel very isolated. And I think the best thing for our children is to just show them that they're there. And when I mean by show them, I don't mean just verbally, but like showing up as a model. And also just, giving them, I think, the tools and resources, but also giving them the space as well, to be able to find their own path of healing. I think that a lot of um, there's a lot of people out there, and I think of just also books and what we read and what we hear, that it's easy to get into this mindset being like, this is the way to do it. And there are great resources, there are great ways and strategies that'll help. But everyone is different. Every child is different. Every child needs something differently. And if we could be open to that, I think that's what is so important.
Yes, for sure. And that goes for education also. Not every child learns the same. Every child's learning mechanism is different. What's effective for them is different. But when it comes to trauma specifically, right, and working with the families and their children, do you first get to know, their situation, and then according to what you notice about the child and their specific trauma, that's how you adjust maybe your support? Or is there sort of a basic starting point for you in your support of these children and their families?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think the opening to learning, I think, is big, because I think that I'm coming into this perspective of like, I know what's the best thing, for this child. Um, and yes, as an expert, a parent, or someone who's facilitating wants that for the child. But I think listening to their experience, listening to what they're feeling, and really taking a step back to maybe not jump in as much, but just have um, just a bigger opportunity to listen to the child, I think is big, because I think that naturally as adults, and as a parent or as a teacher, like we want to take that child's pain away, right? There's like that drive. You're like, I want to be able to take it away. I want to be able to show them how to overcome it. Um, but that may take some time, and maybe there's a disconnect for others, or just even myself when I work with children, where I'm like, okay, I'd be listening to a child, like, for example, when I'm working with children in therapy, and and often, right, I'll listen to a child tell their story or what they're kind of going through, and I'll have an idea of like what could help them. But before kind of going into them, I kind of really give them the spotlight, right? Making them feel empowered, and I think that's the biggest thing, is making them feel in control of their own healing, right, of their own resilience. Yeah, I always have this mentality that it's that there's beauty out of trauma, right? Trauma can be super messy, but there's also beauty. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. At my camp, we always have this expression: "'Tis better to light a candle than curse the darkness." And I think with that is being able to help empower children to, right, just to understand their experience, and use it as a mechanism of how they want to show up in the world, right? How they want to treat others, how they want to be treated, and how they want to be able to develop their own personal narrative, of who they are as an individual. Because experience is what shape us, and I think if we can really give children that empowerment, that this does not have to define you as weak, right? This doesn't define you as something bad, right? This experience can really define you and show your strength, and also help to educate others, right?
Mm-hmm. So, I don't want to get too personal, right? If this is too personal for you, but in your grieving process, from what you can remember, can you maybe walk us a little through that process, how that was for you as a child? I know now you're an adult, and our brains sometimes forget a lot of traumatic experiences to protect us from them. But anything you can recall that you don't mind sharing with us in terms of your grieving and healing process?
Yeah, when I look back to 9/11, I think that everyone was in a state of shock, as in a lot of traumatic events. I also just see it as 9/11 as a whole new opportunity for mental health. There was people who were so eager to be there and show up and help. Um, but then there's also a mentality where like, hold on a second, we need to just kind of take a step back and see and really listen to what is the most effective way. For me personally, I was really impacted by the community that it came from. I felt like my biggest memories were just like how everyone showed up, and how everyone really strived to be able to do even like the smallest act of kindness, or just kind of put away all of the animosity, or just like kind of things that kind of show up, and just to be in community with other people. And I think that's like what really had an impact on me. And you know it's interesting because I think part of the reason why I went into all this is because I felt like I didn't really come to face with my own trauma until probably a little bit when I got a little bit older. And I think part of it is that I was so focused on being happy, or kind of overcoming it, and not wanting to be sad, and just wanting to just just like to show everyone that I'm strong. And when I work with children now, I think that's the biggest thing I say to them is like, it's okay to cry, right? It's okay that you feel frustrated, you feel angry. It's okay if you just need a day to just like be silly. I mean, you know, I think that healing can come in many forms, right? Sometimes it's like I don't really want to be in this cloud of sadness that I'm surrounded by. Like, can I just go out and can I go laugh, or can I be silly, or can I just escape for a little bit? And there's a big focus on the escape, I think, for just not only myself but my other peers, like who had lost a parent. And that's kind of what our camp was all about, was escaping this label of the 9/11 kid. And I think for me personally was being okay that I like needed my moments, is being okay that like some days are harder than others, and not having to hide it. I think that I definitely wanted to embrace like my dad's mentality, and like my dad was um, like he was like nicknamed Mr. Mayor in our town. He would like talk to everyone, he helped everyone, he was like he's big about family. Everyone like knew him as this like bright light. And I was very much in this mentality of, well, I have to just keep on being like my dad. I got to carry on his legacy. And that's very much why I want to do right now. What I want to do is like, but my 10-year-old self like felt like I was like taking over the world, rather than being like, it's okay to be a kid and to like have my feelings. And I think this is a big thing, is that sometimes like feelings come out in like very different ways, right? So we see children who are going through something and they have tantrums, or like maybe they're not talking as much. And I think sometimes individuals who don't have that trauma informed um, background or experience, right? They're very quick to like label that as a misbehavior, rather than like, wait a second, let's get to the root of it, right? Maybe this behavior is like showing up because they need the tool set, and they need someone to literally hold their hand and model and be there, just like physically be there, and and accept like every emotion that's kind of coming up. I think for me, like I was surrounded by a lot of adults. I had to go to, I just remember going to, um, a lot of memorial events, and I look back and I think a lot of like, I feel like a lot of my childhood was taken away from me, um, because I had to just, I had to, like, I was trying to constantly comprehending something. And so when I see a child now kind of going through something, I try to identify that right away and help them, right, remember, like, who they are, like what, how they're taking responsibility, right, whether consciously or unconsciously, maybe for mom or dad's, emotions, or their brother and sister. And I think more importantly, just let them just let it all go. Like, say everything that's kind of coming up for you, right? Like, be that person that you're like, you're listening, you're accepting it, right? You're standing right there with them, um, because there's listening where, like, okay, like, yeah, or there's listening where you're really stepping into their shoes and you're really standing right beside them. And I think for me, it was something that it's not that I don't know if I had it. I just didn't think I didn't think that it was okay. Like, I felt like there was, I had to go and, and cry away from other people. Or I had to have, I had to, like, get good grades in school and stay active. And that's another thing that's very interesting, is that it makes sense. Like, when we're going through something, it's easier to run away to stay busy. But not everyone has that, capability. So I think that was a huge thing for me, of just helping children not isolate, and yet at the same time allowing a little bit of isolation. I think children sometimes need their space, like for them to kind of figure it out themselves, and give them their space, but also let them know that, like, their space is okay and that you're there.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I think I will never pretend I know what it's like to lose a parent, right? I cannot even imagine, all of the many steps of grief and acceptance, and just all the emotions that come up in that process. But I do think, as is the case with probably any sort of trauma, it's being okay, feeling, that you don't have to power through it. You don't have to be strong through it all at all times, especially as a child. As you said, I mean, I can imagine for any kid, it would feel like they lost part of their childhood, happening at such a young age. But having the space to feel their feelings, but also the people that are showing their support, as you say, that's got to be just so huge. And I think there's such a better awareness of mental health in general nowadays that really support that acceptance, that if you need, help, you can seek it. If you need mental health therapies or whatever that looks like for, the parent or child that needs it, it's less taboo, so it's more accessible, I think. And so I think it's incredible work, what you do. It's very important work. And I think children really do need that, in general, but especially those who have experienced some kind of acute trauma like this. And you mentioned you did Teach for America, correct?
Yes.
So as a teacher, you were, I believe, in San Francisco, you told me?
Yes.
Okay. And how was that experience? Did you have kids with different kinds of traumas, but as a teacher versus a mental health counselor at the time, your toolbox was a little different, or your responsibilities were a little different? How was that time in your life, as a teacher in probably a not so great part of town?
Yeah, so I did Teach for America right out of college, and I got placed in San Francisco with early childhood education, and I thought, wow, like, how incredible, right, to be a teacher and be the forefront, right, of a child, starting their educational career. And I also just loved how the big like focus around emphasis around social emotional learning, which I think is very linked to when we talk about trauma, because we all don't know as a society what someone is going through, right? And children spend the majority of their time at school, and so how can we best support them? And backtrack a little bit, like after September 11th, I remember going back to school, and it was a very like weird, isolating experience. And I don't think it was meant to be that way. I just think it was just a nature of just like, okay, well, I'm in school and I need to take my math test. Like, rather than, okay, I didn't know how to like seek out support. And I think that, like some of my teachers were like, I'm here for you, but then, okay, but you know what, let's keep some normalcy and go through, the school day. Um, and I really think about what it means to cultivate a safe place, for a child to really know that another adult is there. Um, and when I had this opportunity, I said, this is great. Like, I also like love kids, and so I was really excited for the opportunity. I was very eager when I got to San Francisco, when I was getting placed, to be placed in an environment that needed a lot of trauma informed practices. And so I worked in the outskirts of San Francisco, and I worked at a Head Start, which I think is just an incredible, model. And it was just really focusing on bringing in the families and having a relationship with the parents. Like, I would do home visits to my students' homes, and I definitely got what I asked for. I entered a school that needed. I entered a school that didn't have a lot of consistency, and that's huge as it is, right? Like, you know, no consistent teachers, no consistent administration. It was a neighborhood that gun violence was huge there, and it reoccurred, very frequently. And I had students that had a really hard time just being in a school environment because of what was kind of going on at home, and they show that in many different ways, rather just isolating, not talking, acting out. And it really took a lot for me to just um, step away from the fixing, but just showing up. And I was right out of college, so I was really young. I think what really impacted me when I was in Teach for America was my first year. I witnessed two shootings. So there was a shooting right outside of my school. My students were not with me, but I was at a bus stop, and I was with like two other teachers. We hid behind a bus stop, and I ran to the Boys and Girls Club, and I just remember being with about like 20 people, and I said, "Oh, did anyone call 911?" And everyone looked at me like I had like five heads, and so I picked up the phone and I called 911. Um, and I mean, talk about like, for me understanding trauma, I was getting asked all these questions, and I had to say, it's like, I don't really remember much. I mean, this is like, I just acted so quickly, and I don't really, remember what exactly happened. But I think the biggest thing afterwards that really impacted me was this happened right by my school, and there was a mental health consultant who worked at my school who was incredible. We worked like hand in hand, had a great relationship, and I was always like, um, just kind of, asking him like, what can I do better? And and I remember, calling him and telling him about this, and um, you know, Head Starts and early child education was not really in the definition of education in San Francisco at the time. I don't know what it's like now. And so something like that, like no support resources were sent, which I thought was absurd. Because I was like, wait a second, these children are so young. Like, this is crazy. But also, no, like there was just kind of like no support that was sent, and I think that's important too because yes, my kids for the first one were not there, but as teachers, we have to be able to like have our own bucket fill, be able to really show up for our children. And I thought that was an issue that there's not the proper resources to be supporting the teachers. And so he actually called a state, had someone, come in, and they were, we had this whole conversation. They're like, how are we just being informed of this? And the minute they left, which is probably like the day after, there was gunshots outside of my classroom window, and my students were all with me, and someone had been impacted. It was because the Boys and Girls Club was right next door. And I remember calling my families and just saying, okay, like, we're going to keep them here. But I think that like, when things come down, like maybe let's get everyone home because they all live close by. Like I can bring some of them home, like this way they're in their own homes. And I remember them, and they called me Miss Cait. Like I remember them saying, like, Miss Cait, like this happens all the time. Like what do you mean we need to pick them up? And I just like had this like aha like moment, like wow, like there is such like an immunity to this form of violence. Like kids, like my children, my students were all used to this. Like they thought that this is like this is like a normal thing that happened every day. And so it was really after that where I wanted to finish my Teach for America commitment and then go into, clinical psychology or mental health counseling. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I need to stay in early childhood education. Like, we need more people who are trauma informed. Like, I want to be outspoken about this. Like, I want to really gear toward also like providing the proper like training for teachers, because I found myself as a first responder, to these children. And this is like, and teachers like do not go to school or have the training to be that. And so that was big for me as well. That I thought that was really important. Um, so yeah.
That's heavy. I mean, talk about absurd when you think that this is the norm of some people and some young children. And I mean, we've obviously heard of, I haven't personally experienced, but there's just been way too many school shootings in the past several years. I cannot even fathom how that is normalized. I don't know how, this
And how can they go back
country
to
has
school?
allowed that. And then, and then how on top of that, you're just expected to carry on with your life like nothing. And you're in such impressionable years. I mean, at any age, this is like traumatic, but children, I mean, it's incredible that there's not more support. And then obviously we could talk all day long about like gun control issues, which are a whole other topic. But so now as a mental health counselor, right, if you were confronted with the situation that you were in when you were teaching, what, if you can even narrow it down, right, what's a form of support you offer kids who've been through, school shooting? Just, I don't know if you could walk us through what that might look like. And for parents also to know what resources, they can provide at home. Maybe not everyone has the access or the means to seek out that help for their children, So, walk us through that if you can, please.
Yeah, I think that there could be a big emphasis on like my child needs to do this, and bombarding children with resources and support, which could be detrimental in the sense where like, okay, children need to like take a second to digest it and figure out what it is. I think especially for schools, my personal take on it, and listen, like I was a teacher. I think academics are important, but my model was always like no child is ever going to learn if they don't feel safe in their classroom, they don't feel supported. Um, it's like forget about it. Like academics is out the window, right?
Yeah.
And like also, it's just like a banking model. You're just like throwing information into their head. Like nothing is going to be retained. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that it's also providing an environment, to be able to speak to one another, relate to one another, verbally, non-verbally. I think that community healing is incredible, and I think that that's something that is, really, really, supportive. Like because a mental health counselor can go in there, or any kind of professional can go in there, and they have like incredible resources to help. But that's like an outside person's coming in, and if we can help children facilitate, using one another, to talk to one another, to process one another, and as adults we can facilitate that. I think that is huge. I think that you know it's not like a snap of a finger and like your trauma is gone, right? Like it takes time, and I think that also modeling for our children, is really big as well. I think that parents, rightfully so, would. I mean, I can't imagine being a parent and having a child who's gone through like a school shooting. But I think of being able to have like open conversations, and conversations where you're really gaining your child's trust, I think is important. And of course, whatever is developmentally appropriate. But I also think that there's also just some, um, psychoeducation with parents as well, of really empowering them, like, your child your child best. And it really like empower them to, like feel that like sense of like, ownership that they have the capability. Because I think that outside support, like a mental health counselor, other professional is great. Um, but that needs to happen at home as well. And I think that's like the biggest thing around social emotional learning and support is, this needs to be happening, not only in that setting, but at home as well. And our children need to see, like, as adults, how we're handling it as well, and how we're also cultivating how we're taking care of ourselves. I think that is really big. Because I think that children are so incredibly resilient, and I just think that learning from one another, and supporting one another and leaning on each other, especially bringing in children who've been through something similar. Peer-to-peer support is huge.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense just because I remember as a kid even thinking, oh, my mom won't understand, or like an
Yeah.
adult won't understand, And even though maybe we could, as parents, understand kids, it's not the same level of trust, perhaps. And especially, as you say, when you have kids who can really empathize because they've been through similar situations, I think that probably allows for a easier opening up
Mhm.
with that other, peer who's similar aged and has gone through similar experiences. So yeah, I can definitely see how peer support and those kinds of support groups are just really, really important and impactful.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to ask, since you are not yet a parent, but you do work, a lot with children and other parents. Do you think that your work is in any way impacted by the fact that you're not a parent, or even when you become one, do you think it'll change in any way? I'm just interested in hearing
Yeah.
your thoughts on that.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I love this question because, a lot of my friends are parents. And I mean, cannot wait to be a parent myself. I think there's like the same note of like what I say about me being a mental health therapist right now. Like I wanted to do that, like, since I was in high school, right? But I'm so grateful for all the experience I had teaching before I, stepped into that role, and also how I also, worked on myself and went through life myself. I think that, you know, all of these things I think will definitely support me in being a parent. But I also think that there is like this, and I'm sure we can go on and on about this. It's like a whole nother topic. Um, I feel like there's something that gets me very um, like aggravated, and is that there could be a lot of judgment around parenting. There's so many different things out there, like um, books and things on Instagram and TikTok, and I just think even just like depending on like some communities, like there's a lot of comparison to everything, and I have so much empathy for parents in that sense, where I was like, wait, like we all need to be in this together. Like we all need to just like support one another, normalize one another, and also recognize like our children are all different, and also like really lift each other up. That like we're all trying our best and we're all learning. And so like it's interesting because I could say yes, I taught for 8 years. I studied child development. I'm a child therapist, but I can guarantee, like becoming a parent, I'm going to be, I'm not going to be perfect in any means, and it's going to be a whole other learning experience, for me. So I think I think it'll definitely support me being a parent. I don't think it'll make me the most like amazing parent. I don't think that there's like such a thing. I think that we all, that I just have so much respect for parents who are just open about their own experience, and also parents who like lift each other up. I think that it's easy to feel, and maybe I say this, I look at like the parents that I work with, and also like my friends. Like I just think that I see so much of like this shame and this discouragement, and I can imagine like maybe like if your child is acting out, and like and if people are like staring at you and kind of having that feeling of like and kind of feeling like without a control. But I think it's um yeah I just have so much admiration for parents who are just kind of sticking it through and giving their best, and I feel like we just need to give more love to parents. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's true, as with everything, it's going to be a learning experience no matter what, just cuz you might have, done it before and it's still a different child the second or third time around. I will soon find out that because I'm pregnant with my second. But I think that, as you said, we definitely need to lift each other up and just have more empathy for one another, because we know how hard it is. And I think especially before becoming a parent, it's really easy to judge parents because you've never been through it. You don't know how hard it is. You see a kid having a tantrum at the mall, and naturally we as parents feel like, we're at fault, and the other person probably thinks it's the parent's fault too, when really a child is just being a child. It's having a moment.
Yep.
We all have moments. I have trouble self-regulating sometimes. So imagine if I was a 2-year old, I would definitely be having a meltdown
Yeah.
in the middle of the mall. So it's just, we are all trying our best, honestly. And sometimes our best one day is better than our best on other days. We just don't have the same bandwidth every day that we have. Like maybe yesterday I had a lot more patience because I probably had a little more time to, I don't know, dedicate to something that I, love and that filled my cup, and tomorrow I didn't have that time and I'm more irritable. And I mean, bottom line, we're not perfect. So we're all learning as we go.
And also like our children are growing up in a very different world than we grew up in. And so I think that
Mm-hmm.
we just really need to acknowledge that. Like, again, this is a whole another big topic, but like technology is huge, right? We didn't have that growing up. Like, I mean, I look at like I work with some middle school and high schoolers, and I sometimes, and I think I find myself listening a lot more of just really trying to truly empathize with them and be next to them and just to understand and really just communicate to them being like, this is really difficult because different things that are kind of going on because of TikTok and Instagram and everything. It's huge, right?
Mm-hmm. Technology has definitely made a big impact on this generation.
Yeah.
Um, as you say, that could be an entire episode on, just on that. So with this, I wrap up our conversation, and I thank you so much for coming on and talking to us a little about your personal life experience and just the incredible work you do with children and families. So thank you again, Cait, for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Gracias, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Unaparent podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe as we release a new episode at least every month with an exciting new guest. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram for all the Unaparent content you never knew you needed.